All right, so today we're going to get into this really fascinating and honestly kind of provocative idea. It's something that completely challenges how we think about expertise. We're going to look at a real-world proposal that basically says, hey, all these years of high-stakes, hands-on experience, what if that's just as rigorous, just as valuable as getting a PhD? So here's the big question we're tackling. Think about this. Can the absolutely grueling, multi-year process of building a fully regulated digital bank, from the ground up, can that actually be considered the equivalent of earning a doctorate? I mean, that is a bold claim, right? It puts real-world, in-the-trenches achievement head-to-head with traditional academic credentials. Okay, so let's get into the story here. It all starts with this, truly radical research proposal from a fintech entrepreneur named Vladislav Solotki. And get this. He didn't just, fill out an application for a PhD program. No, he proposed an entirely new kind of partnership with the university. And this wasn't just some abstract idea, some thought experiment. No, this is the real deal. This is the actual email he sent. He framed his whole application not as a student who's there to learn, but as an expert partner offering up a unique real-world laboratory for them to explore together. He's basically saying, look, my entire career has been one long empirical study. Let's you and I analyze the data. So this brings us to the core idea, what he calls the practitioner-researcher model. And the concept is actually pretty simple. Instead of the university seeing him as this, empty vessel that they need to fill with knowledge, they would treat his entire career as this incredibly rich data set, just sitting there waiting for rigorous academic study. It's all about turning that messy, lived experience into real, generalizable knowledge. All right, so let's look at his evidence. Exhibit A, what he calls his PhD in practice. This is the story of him co-founding and launching a rival bank, a fully licensed digital bank right here in a U.S. jurisdiction. Now, just look at this timeline for a second. It took a full year just to get the initial permit to organize. Then another year and a half of intense, hardcore regulatory review before they finally got the full license. We're talking about a 2.5-year journey. And if you think about it, that sounds an awful lot like the time it takes to complete a PhD, doesn't it? And this table just lays out the analogy perfectly. I mean, think about it. In a PhD program, you've got your research hypothesis, right? Well, in banking, you've got your business model and compliance framework. For a PhD, you're drafting chapters and getting feedback from your advisor. In fintech, you're amending applications based on tough audits from regulators. And the final defense, the grand finale, instead of a panel of professors grilling you, you're facing down federal regulators from the Fed and FinCEN. And the validation you get at the end isn't just a piece of paper. It's a license to actually operate and a SOC 2 compliance report, which is a super rigorous audit of your security. And this quote from him, I think, really hits the nail on the head. The regulator doesn't care about the truth. They care about verifiable processes. What he learned from this whole ordeal is that in the world of high-stakes compliance, it's not about abstract ideas or what you think is true. What really matters, the only thing that matters, is having a rock-solid, auditable, and verifiable process that can stand up to the most intense scrutiny imaginable. Now that is a real-world lesson. Okay, but the argument doesn't stop there. Let's move on to Exhibit B, his time as a venture capitalist. See, before he even thought about building a bank, his work at a VC firm called Life SREDA was basically like running a massive research lab for the entire fintech industry. And we are not talking small numbers here. $140 million. As the managing partner, he raised and managed 2 funds of that size, both focused 100% on fintech. And this huge pile of cash wasn't just about, picking winners and hoping for the best. It was a systematic way to identify and test the most promising ideas, the biggest hypotheses out there in the market. And, the results really speak for themselves. This isn't just talk. His track record is basically a series of validated hypotheses. He got in early on challenger banks like Simple and Fidor. Both of them got snapped up by huge traditional banks. He was an early backer of SumUp, which is now a massive fintech unicorn. You could almost say each successful exit was like getting a paper published in a top journal. It proved he could see where the entire industry was going, way ahead of the curve. So, after all that, all this meta-research, investing in all these companies, what was the big takeaway? What was the grand conclusion? Well, it all boiled down to one powerful idea. Digital identity is the new money. He realized that in our modern digital world, having a verifiable, user-controlled identity is just as fundamental, just as valuable as actual currency. And that insight, that would drive everything he did next. Okay, so this is where it all comes together. This is the payoff. We get to see exactly how all this deep, practical, in the trenches experience translates directly into real academic value. This is the moment where the practitioner's data set smashes right into the university's research agenda. And this synergy matrix, this thing is just so powerful. It perfectly maps his real-world experience to what the academics are trying to figure out. So, for example, look at the first row. The university is doing research on privacy tech for fighting financial crime. Well, what's his experience? Oh, just architecting the entire anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing framework, that's AML/CFT, for a bank that specifically serves high-risk clients. Or how about open banking? Yep, he led an API-driven banking as a service, or BAS strategy, that demanded top-tier security compliance. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs? He's already written tons of analysis on that stuff. See, the point is, he's not coming to the university to learn how to do this stuff. He's coming to help them create new knowledge, because he has already done it. And let's be clear, this proposal isn't just about looking back and analyzing what he's already done. The real goal here is to build a partnership that can generate new, really impactful knowledge for the future, to tackle some of the absolute biggest challenges we're facing in digital identity and finance. I mean, just look at how ambitious these proposed research projects are. He wants to dig into that tough balancing act between anti-money laundering rules and our right to privacy. He's proposing they explore government as a service, kind of like what you see in super digital nations like Estonia. And maybe the most powerful one of all, he wants to research a Nansen Passport 2.0. The idea is to use verifiable digital credentials to give a legal identity to refugees and people who are stateless. I mean, we're talking about huge, thorny, real-world problems here. So, this whole wild proposal brings us right back to a really critical question for our time. In a world that's changing faster than we can keep up with, how should we value deep lived experience versus traditional formal credentials? What's the best way to close that gap between doing something and knowing about it? You know, there's no easy answer here, but it's a question that's getting more and more important every single day.